Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am news editor for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, as usual, we just want to remind you to leave a like, to share, to subscribe, and again remind you that now we have subscriptions and memberships available here in our YouTube channel where you can donate directly to the Cradle. Also, please make sure to check out our Patreon where you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle as well. And we want to let you know that coming this Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern, we are going to have our very first live transmission, our very first live show where we can interact with you, where you can we can answer your questions, and you're going to see us cover the latest in this very intense week of news. We want to thank you for always supporting the Cradle, and we hope to see you there this Thursday. Okay, guys, so as we started to this recording, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has just met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, reportedly delivering a letter from Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. At the same time, the Israeli warplanes have been bombing relentlessly across Iran, hitting universities, civilian infrastructure, even a prison. We have Donald Trump tweeting about "Make Iran Great Again" once more, alleged seemingly pushing for a regime change. We have J.D. Vance on TV saying we're not at war with Iran, we are at war with Iran's nuclear program, in such an absurd statement. But obviously, hanging over all of this is the United States attack on Iran overnight on Saturday, in which they claim to have destroyed Iran's nuclear program, although many question marks remain about that. But what we do know for certain, this was Washington's direct entry into this war. So, having said all of that, and with everything that has happened over the past several hours, I want to hear you guys' thoughts about this truly historic weekend.
For me, I think, there's a lot of discussion, very, very valid points that are being made for and against how, that this is a positive thing for Iran, a negative thing for the US, Israel, or vice versa. There's a lot of conversations happening everywhere, and I think this is super important. But one point that I'm not hearing, and I really, really would like to make on the Cradle, is that something huge happened early Sunday morning when the US struck Iran directly in a major, major military strike that, according to the Americans, utilized 127 US fighter jets. And I don't remember if they said 14 of their bunker buster bombs that had never been used before in any theater. And that is that the US just in that strike ended the era of proxy wars. Now, proxy wars have been in effect since the Second World War between the major powers, who were all nuclear powers at that point. So nobody wanted a direct confrontation between any of the five nuclear powers, and even, the undeclared ones, as we worried about when Pakistan and India went at it just a few weeks ago, right? Both are undeclared nuclear powers. And why is it important that the era of proxy wars is over? So empire, in order to gain a strategic depth, moving closer to encircle Russia, was doing color revolutions. They were doing regime changes in West Asia, wherever they saw an obstacle, really. And this was how it worked with the big powers. Regime change or proxy wars basically mean a big master, a big power, is behind the disruption or the stabilization of a country, in which the major powers are in a hegemonic war with each other, but not directly. And this was important. In these wars, there was conventional arms used, but there was a lot of irregular warfare. Assassination, subversion activities, propaganda, terror attacks, as we saw in Syria, as we saw in Yugoslavia, as we saw in, you know, in Libya. It it often included the great power that was trying to destabilize a state or cause regime change to enter and do that. But here's what's different about Iran, and many people may disagree with me, but the US has now entered a direct confrontation with a peer competitor. Now, immediately, y'all are saying, well, the US's military is so far superior. It's so much bigger. The US is so much wealthier. Um, when I say peer competitor, if you look at just Iran's missile program, very advanced missile program, uh, I would say in conventional warfare, that program alone is a peer competitor with the great powers. Okay. Not only does it have a substantial arsenal, and probably the biggest in the entire region, but far more advanced than any arsenal in this region. And it's an indigenous program. So, in conventional warfare, with its missiles program, Iran is a peer competitor of the United States. Certainly a peer competitor of Israel's, right? But Israel is the US's proxy. But when the US went it alone on Sunday morning, it entered a war directly with a peer competitor. The other way to look at peer competitor is that there are three players on the global stage that we're all recognizing: Russia, China, Iran. They all have they're at different stages of development, different stages of economic prosperity, different stages of technological advancement, military advancement, etc. But these are the primary US adversaries. The reason they're US adversaries is because they envision, articulate, and develop tangibly alternative multipolar order that will contest the unipolar one that is US led. This is also why one of these countries wouldn't be able to do it successfully by itself or as successfully. Three of them create, they're not an alliance, but they're in this together. And we've seen their relationships deepen strategically, militarily, and economically every single year and accelerate. So I think the major change that happened on Sunday morning is the era of proxy wars that was established from the Second World War is now over. We have peer competitors at war directly with each other. And if anyone thinks that Russia and China doesn't view it this way and understand the absolute necessary to underpin and support Iran's victory in this confrontation, you're going to be proven wrong.
Charmaine, I have a question about this. Do you think then that what does this mean for Ukraine? If this is the end of proxy wars, where is Ukraine left standing at this point then?
So it doesn't mean that proxy war doesn't continue, in the sense that their fire's been lit everywhere. But the Russians know that Ukraine is the last US proxy war against it. The Chinese know that Taiwan is the last proxy war against it. After that, it becomes direct. Okay, so Israel's proxy war, or the US's proxy Israel's war against Iran was the last one against Iran by the US. The US has failed in its regime change um, operations in Iran for decades now. It's still using the old playbook, though. And this is going to really, I think, impact detrimentally the way the US targets Iran moving forward. If it's direct conventional warfare, then the US has dropped its playbook. But it's not to say that it still will not utilize subversion, sabotage, assassinations, terror attacks, etc. in this war. Um, so I think this is it basically. Israel's doing the proxy war with Iran. Taiwan would have been the proxy war for China, Ukraine the proxy war for Russia. The Americans have nowhere to go in Ukraine except full on support or stop the war.
What do you think, Karim? What do you think of Charmaine's perspective? And also, are we at the tipping point of a direct US-Iran war?
Well, I view what's happening is that I think currently they are trying. First, they said they don't want to change the regime in Iran. Now they are saying they want to change it. And currently, what the Israelis are targeting, they are targeting police stations and interior security forces. And now they are saying that they
And
are.
universities and hospitals. And they even, and I couldn't believe this, they attacked the big sign in Tehran, the clock, the countdown to how many days Israel has to still exist. They actually hit that today. Like,
They hit a prison as well. What is the purpose of bombing a prison in the middle of a populated city?
I think to get Iranian dissidents all excited, but actually they're targeting potentially the relatives of those Iranian dissidents. Do you know? I'm not sure, but what's, I think, Kenny, we were talking about this earlier. What this made Israel's strikes today made clear that Israel now lacks target banks.
What do you think, Karim?
Yeah, I think that now they are trying to do a regime change. First, they warned Iran. They said this is not to change the regime. This is only to postpone or to delay Iran nuclear capabilities and missile program. But now they are talking about regime change. And of course, this is dangerous not only for Iran but also for the region, because we saw the chaos that happened in Syria and Iraq and other places. Um and I hope that it doesn't work. And as Sharmin said, yani now, as they say, the United States entered the chat, but still we didn't see a response from the Iranians, and we'll see if Iran will retaliate. Currently, now the war is only between Israel and Iran. Of course, many countries are backing Israel, but the actual war now is between these two. If it expands and it becomes Israel and the United States against Iran alone, I think we will see more bombings in Iran, and I think China or and Russia should practice more of their power to aid Iran, because currently Iran, especially in their air defense system, they are suffering, and they lack this strategic weapon, which is to intercept Israeli planes and tankers. So we'll see what will happen. Currently, for me, I'm viewing this war day by day, because every day something is happening. Every day, new targets are being established by the Israelis. And just today, Iran announced that they used two new missiles that they never used before. One of them has multiple warheads, meaning that when it enters the atmosphere again, the warhead. Detaches, and many bombs inside the warhead comes into Israeli cities. So we have to wait and see what might happen between
And
the two.
also it disperses Israel's ability to intercept when it has to chase
Yeah,
80 fires.
and even normal missiles they couldn't intercept. The percentage is so high. Previously, when Hezbollah or the Palestinians, when they fire rockets, although they are very near the the Israeli borders, the interception rate, according to the Israelis, was about like 90%. Now the Israelis are saying that the interception is like about from 50 to 60%.
It dropped. It dropped at some point last week because there was even this report in Bloomberg about the Iranian hackers being able to access, CCTV cameras and traffic cameras in Israeli cities to better pinpoint their targets, or better, see how well they hit. There's something interesting too that I want to get you guys' perspectives on. Over the past a few hours, there's been several reports in Western media about Israel and the U.S. lobbying, in particular Arab nations, to get Iran to essentially de-escalate. Israel wants an exit to this war. They're saying they want a quick exit to this war, that they expect to finish eliminating the remaining targets in Iran within days. That's what they claim. And then after that, they essentially would be willing to call it a day's job, and we can be finished with this. We also have heard that the U.S. is lobbying China to interfere with it, not interfere, to talk with Iran into not responding to U.S. attacks. What is the Iranian position here? Is Iran looking to de-escalate?
Iran yesterday, there were two statements that caught my attention. One was the Iranians saying after the U.S. strike, now the war has begun. Um, I urge our viewers to recognize that Iran has planned while Iran has planned for confrontations with U.S. proxies like Israel and, terror groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda, and even potentially missiles being lobbed in from bases in Persian Gulf neighbor states. Uh, Iran has, for over 4 decades, been priming itself, its military doctrine, its arsenal, its kit of military tools for a direct confrontation with the United States. So when the Iranians said yesterday, now the war has started, we understand that this is the war that Iranians have been prepping for more than 40 years. I think the other thing that we heard from Iran yesterday that was an estimation that this war would take about 6 months. Of course, the Israelis are running to try to get this war stopped. It is absolutely not in Iran's interest to stop the war right now. It is absolutely in Israel's interest to stop the war. Israel is getting hit badly. Today, the IRGC said in its 21st wave of its missile operations, the organization has changed tactics and is attacking new targets across Israel. So instead of the focus we've seen in the last week of Tel Aviv, Haifa, that the IRGC is doing missile strikes from the very north of the country to the very south. I think it's a message to show there is nowhere in your little piddly state we can't hit. Now, Karim said, the Iranians haven't retaliated against the U.S., but also from yesterday, uh, Iranian commentators were pointing out that Israel is, in fact, the biggest, most critical, most vital U.S. forward operating military base in the entire region. The Israelis would have liked Iran to retaliate against U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, in Qatar, okay, because it would gain animosity potentially from its neighbors. But the U.S. was very careful and scared. This is why the U.S. did not launch its operation on Sunday against Iran from its bases anywhere, not even Diego Garcia. It launched it from U.S. territories, calculating that Iran would not hit the United States, okay? Which I don't think Iran needs to ever. Uh, but Iran's response was actually great. It had no reason then to attack any U.S. bases in any neighboring Arab country, but it went full force to attack the U.S.'s most vital military base, I would argue, anywhere in the world, and that is Israel. And this is why the Americans and Israelis are scurrying so quickly to try to end this war and to pull in the Russians and pull in the Chinese and pull in the Indians and Pakistanis, whoever might be able to intervene with Iran. And I want to caution, this is what the Israelis did with Gaza and Lebanon when things got too hot for it. It sought an exit, but an exit um, within the confines and parameters of a very bad deal that never um, inhibits Israel from continuing to do strikes. Iran will want to never, ever see another strike from the Americans and Israelis again. In order to do that, it has to punish the enemy so severely that they will never, ever think of doing this again. And I argued last week that I believe Iran's political goal is that Netanyahu has to be ousted by the Americans, by his Western allies. It is a face-saving way for the Americans to end the war and also, um, uh, you know, get rid of Netanyahu and save Israel. Do you know what I mean? But Iran, that's only the political goal. Militarily, Iran needs to establish the kind of deterrence that would put fear in any country in this region ever striking Iran's territory again.
Something interesting that has been kind of lost in the shuffle over the past 3 days is the fact that on Friday, Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister, was meeting with the European troika, as they like to call them, with the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and the UK, in this, alleged attempt at diplomacy. In retrospect, it seems like another time waste measure that the U.S. promoted. Arakchi then went to the UN Security Council. He spoke from Geneva as well before meeting with the foreign ministers. I've seen some commentators and some reports talking about his current trips as a kind of rallying the troops moment, rallying support for Iran, and more than support for Iran, condemnation against Israel. Yesterday, before heading to Moscow, Arakchi gives this speech, and he says in one of the lines, he says, humanity has come too far as a species to allow a lawless bully to take us back to the law of the jungle. Now, at the same time, you have the Iranian parliament discussing and officially proposing withdrawing from the non-proliferation treaty, withdrawing from cooperation with the IAEA, and essentially saying what is the point of any of these multilateral institutions, of any international organization, if you can have a sovereign nation come in and bomb us in the middle of the night after allegedly calling for diplomacy, after having us, go meet with their employees in Geneva, and then nothing else matters, right? And then Donald Trump goes one moment says one thing, the next he says another. Not even to speak about the Israelis and the situation in Gaza, or the fact that their cities are getting like sections of their cities are getting razed to the ground for the first time ever. What are we looking at here in terms of Iran's standing among its allies and among the larger international community? Do you think there's going to be any resonance to this call by the Iranians? Karim, what do you think?
Unfortunately, currently, I think I don't see any allies for Iran in the whole world. Iran, يعني what happened currently is that Israel managed to destroy Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, and the United States had managed to also deter the factions of in Iraq. So currently, Iran is standing alone. The strategic depth of Iran was Lebanon and then Syria and then Iraq. These points were either destroyed or they were put aside. So currently, Iran is facing the whole world, we can say, alone, including, of course, Israel, the United States, and the West. And the statements that the West said yesterday, the Troika, European Troika, shows us that they see Iran as a weak state currently, and we know these three countries, they were so powerful the last decade, but currently they are not. Usually, what they do, they like to participate in such situations, so they maintain somehow their dominance because they don't have the military capabilities, or even their economy is not as big as the United States or as China to maintain this dominance. So I hopefully we'll see what will happen. As I said, all what Iran needs, they need satellite imagery of where they are targeting in Israel, and some radars, at least for them to know before the attacks that occurs on them from Israel. That's what I think Iran needs. But we'll see. We'll see if China or Russia will support them in this. Because yesterday, Arakji said also that this meeting is very, very important for both countries. I think that's what Iran wants from Russia. That's why they send him in this critical times to Moscow.
Arakchi is not a military man. He's not going there to ask for military aid. He is Iran's top diplomat. He's going there to coordinate on other matters. We will not see Iran's top military men in Moscow. That will happen behind the scenes. Okay, so this is where Karim and I disagree. We had this not just Karim and I, but like in the office earlier today, we were debating this issue, like I said, I believe that Russia and China are absolutely with Iran and will help Iran with whatever it needs in this war. I say this because I said we have earlier in this podcast, we have left the era of proxy wars. This is a very altered state geopolitically in the world, in the great power game, because you have a pure competitor confrontation happening as of yesterday. the Chinese know that the US is aiming for China via Iran in this way because they want to completely destroy China's Belt and Road initiative, which has to go through northern Iran in order to head towards Europe. Okay, so China's Eurasian project, not just linking Asia to each other, but Asia to Europe. They also are gunning for Iran because they're hoping Iran will shut the Strait of Hormuz, and or a big conflagration in the region will cut energy supplies to China. China is not an energy rich country. It depends on these supplies. So this is also a real whack at China, and China knows this very, very well. We will never see China and Russia's cooperation directly in this war unless Iran requests it. Now, Karim thinks, and I think the Israelis and the Americans calculate too, to be honest, that the weakening of Iran's resistance axis allies, mostly non state actors, and of course, Syria, which was its only state ally until Yemen entered, arguably even more strongly than Syria ever could, that the weakening of this axis makes Iran more vulnerable. I will tell you something, okay? Iran's resistance axis was there for one purpose mainly in terms of Iran's security and strategic objectives, and it was to provide Iran with strategic depth. After the 8-year Iran-Iraq war, Iran's never again position was that no country neighboring it would ever be allowed to lob missiles at Iran again. And so, even though Iran is geographically very, very large, it needed to assure and ensure positive relations, trade relations, economic relations, cultural relations, political relations with its neighbors. And if it couldn't do with the neighboring governments, it could do it with non state actors in those countries, political parties, whatever you want, right? So the resistance axis was essential for Iran's strategic depth. Iran has never, ever planned for its war with the United States to include Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Hashd-Shabi. Never, never. Why would it do that? Iran's planned its war, its missile arsenal, its technological advances, its hypersonic capabilities are all directly a result of a 40-plus year war that has been planned and gamed endlessly by the Iranians for a direct confrontation with the United States. It doesn't matter if Hezbollah is weakened or Hamas is weakened strategically in terms of the geographic depth. That has been hit. But Iran's missiles now create that geographic depth for it, that strategic depth. I don't know why people talk about this at all. And let me remind you why I say this too. The Russians offered in their strategic agreement with Iran, which was ratified by the Iranian parliament, I think in April or May only, okay? The Russians offered Iran a mutual defense pact, and the Iranians said no. Iran plans to execute its war by itself. It will only go to Russia or China or others when it has a vulnerability that it needs filled. And right now, that doesn't exist. Okay, so it will need, Arakchi is in Moscow, in my view, for different reasons. It is on the nuclear file. It is to coordinate with Russia's statements at the UN Security Council and in various bodies. We might see, because the UN Security Council got vetoed by America, right? By the United States. We might see the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, the EA, I can't remember. All these other new institutions suddenly start to pass resolutions because the UN Security Council is incapable of it. The other thing is, and I think we should talk about this later, we're going to do an extra segment for our Patreon viewers on some very, very hot topics. And one of this is the potential of a, right now, secret Iranian-Russian plan to nip the nuclear issue in the bud and exclude the entire Western world from this deal but bring in the entire West Asian region into this deal. So that's my view on what you had to say.
Stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that, everyone, please.
So when I talked about strategic, that I meant their confrontation with Israel, not with the United States. That's why, yani, for Iranians, it's more difficult to attack Israel than attacking U.S. bases in the region, and because
How's
they
it
are
more
prepared
difficult?
because of the distance.
But they're doing it every day, every hour.
Yeah, but no, they are only sending some missiles. It's not the
They
firepower
don't have
that
to
they.
send a lot. Israel can be taken out in 24
But they
hours if
didn't,
Iran
Sharmin.
uses ours.
Yeah, but
But you see, there's something called an escalation ladder. Except for an absolute lunatic state, you don't go from 0 to 100. You do an escalatory ladder, militarily at least, in order to prepare your own populations, prepare your adversary, to message your adversary, to garner the support of other international actors, your allies. This is how it works. So Iran on day one used 100 missiles. And then after that, the Israelis panicked because Iran was using 20 missiles, 5 missiles in each salvo, but they were hitting much more key targets. A larger missile number isn't bigger, isn't better.
yes,
It's
it is,
precision,
Sharmin.
that is.
But they are not targeting, for instance, the airports, the military airports, which is very concerning for me. I thought the first thing they should do
How do you
target
know that,
this.
Karim?
You know that we
How do
didn't.
you know that?
The airplane just today, just now before we started this, 30 airplanes attacked Iran, and yesterday 40 airplanes.
They're in friggin' Cyprus and Jordan and other
No,
places.
we would not.
Karim, they
Would have
said they removed their fighter jets.
No, they removed their commercial and big airplanes, not fighter
They
jets.
in True Promise 1, they removed their fighter jets too.
They can't do that, Charmi.
They did. Okay.
You can't launch an airstrike from another country and you're not prepared. If they want to do that,
You're also assuming those were fighter jets that targeted Iran today. Again, please, we are jumping to conclusions. I mean that.
It's not conclusion. That's a fact. I'm saying a fact.
It's a conclusion.
It's a fact, Charmin. Well, Charmin, everybody. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry to think that 100 strikes that Israel purports to have made across Iran today, universities, etc., would even universities near the Iranian Red Crescent building, hitting a signage in Tehran that they didn't like, are they're not using fighter jets for those targets.
What they are using, Charmin?
They also
jets,
bombed the
Charmin?
TV
This is what I'm
station.
saying. We don't know. We don't know. It's even on the nuclear strikes on Sunday. We still don't know the extent of the damage. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but they are using airplanes, Charmin.
We don't know.
They have been down in many drones, the Iranians. You know, they keep putting pictures of drones. I just wanted to mention that they also bombed IRIB again, the broadcaster, the state broadcaster again. All of these war crimes. Something else just came up as we are, at this point in the morning recording this. U.S. officials say that they believe Iran could start soon laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this has been the other huge question mark following the U.S. strikes. Well, is Iran going to use the quote unquote nuclear option, that is its control of the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the global oil output crosses through every day, as well as 20% of the global LNG, liquefied natural gas output, also flows through the Strait of Hormuz every day. Is Iran? Do you think it's likely that they would implement, this ability that they have to essentially close down this strait?
It's one of the many, many cards Iran has in its hands. I don't think Iran will do this right now. It doesn't need to do it right now. It's shown us what it plans to do right now, which is hit the U.S.'s biggest forward operating military base in all of West Asia, which is Israel. I think, like I said earlier, we have to look at the escalation ladder militarily and what makes sense when. This is a card that will be brought out because the U.S. first positioned its strikes yesterday as a one and done, and then immediately almost discredited their own statements by saying we will attack Iran again if it, goes out of line, if it attacks us, if it attacks our allies. So basically, it's open-ended. The U.S. military position on Iran is open-ended right now, from
They
what we
even they
gather.
even
And
brought
so,
into question Trump's claim about destroying Fordow, about destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities. I mean, U.S. officials themselves later kind of were walked that back a bit because they have absolutely no confirmation. Even Israeli officials said, "I don't think we destroyed anything in Iran."
yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's the fog of war. Many of these details aren't known, but you can see from the political positions who is in ascension right now, who is um in the stronger position. If Israel's hitting these below the belt target bags in Iran, basically civilian related things, then they're out of target bags. Iran has plenty in Israel. Karim argues they haven't hit a military base yet.
I
So
didn't say that. I
what did
said
you say? Airstrip?
yeah, the air bases, they are still operating normally in
Yeah,
Israel.
so I think militarily, in terms of infrastructure, there's a lot of target banks left for Iran. Economically, there's huge amounts. Strait of Hormuz being one of them. But I do think right now Iran won't play that card. The parliamentary vote just gave the Iran Security Council everything it needs to make a snap decision when the time is right. As is, I think today there's a motion in Parliament today to vote on Iran's exit from the IAEA. Those things being voted by Parliament doesn't make them um, like an like go into effect, but they prep the national security bodies to make a sudden, quick you know, dealing of a card on the table when the time is right. There's no reason for Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz now, because it would also upset its Persian Gulf countries in there. You need to use that card when your frenemies in the region would really understand why you use that card. Do you know what I
Like,
mean?
so this is actually, because it would be the nuclear option, so to speak, right? Like Iran's, all of a sudden, he wouldn't just hurt their enemies. They would, as you said, China and the Persian Gulf countries. What have we heard from them? Because they must really be freaking out at this point.
Well, they've all pretty uniformly criticized um, Israel's attack on Iran on June 16th. I mean, no doubt about it, and in stronger terms than we've ever heard before. I think a lot of certainly the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis who had urged Trump not to wage direct war against Iran, were when he visited them a few months ago, a month ago. He's really recent. Trump's been in for such a short period; it seems like years. But when they urged him not to do this, and then he turned around, signed a few $1 trillion of their money, right? Deals with them, and then turned around and did exactly what they said don't do. Don't disrupt our economies. Don't disrupt our security. They're not going to be happy with the U.S., which, by the way, creates a huge opening for Beijing and Moscow right now. And you'll see why I refer to this now in the for Patreons only extra segment we're going to do today.
So I stick to my opinion. I think the Gulf countries are an American vessel, as Israel is like one of the strongest bases in the region. The Gulf states are only a vessel, and they have no saying. And if United States said we want to use this base to target Iran, they have no say.
The U.S. didn't use their bases. Why? Even though they evacuated them all.
Because Israel, because the United States is afraid from the Iranian missiles, not because the Saudi Arabians told
They're
them
not
no.
there. They're not there. The point is that the Saudis said no, the Qataris said no, the Emiratis said no, the Bahrainis said no,
Hopefully,
Diego Garcia said no,
hopefully.
Cyprus said no.
We don't know that, Charmin. This is conclusion.
No. Anyways, just something to point to, and again, we will get into this more deeply when we discuss Russia, China, Iran in the next segment, is Dmitry Medvedev. I mean, yeah, his comments immediately after the U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, is that, he said Iran's critical nuclear infrastructure appears not to have been affected or will have sustained only minimal damage. He said the enrichment of Iran's nuclear material and the future production of its nuclear, materials will continue. And then he says a number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. This is why I'm saying that we have ended the era of proxy wars, that we have entered the era of pure direct peer competitor competition, and why Russia and China will do whatever it takes to make sure Iran doesn't lose. You have never had a nuclear power say, I'm going to give a global south country nuclear warheads, or we happen to know countries that are willing to do it, and we're kind of A-okay about it. The reason this has changed is because there was no direct power war because of nuclear weapons, right? Iran will become, in their view, a a peer competitor, because if necessary, it will be given nuclear weapons. And by the way, who will do that? Pakistan, potentially? North Korea, potentially? Russia, China? We'll never know. But Medvedev was also signaling to the Israelis, because Netanyahu is acting, I mean, I think the worst rogue actor we've seen since Hitler, right? Um, he's basically, they've said, Israeli officials have talked about the nuclear option against Iran. And Medvedev is saying Iran will have a nuclear warhead if you even consider it. You better know that Iran is now under Russia's nuclear umbrella. That's what he was saying. He's not like just the ex-president. He's the deputy chairman of Russia's national security body.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Mehdi Debs. I hope I said his name right. His tweet. There seems to be a lot of a lot going on behind the scenes. I think this is pretty obvious. Something I want to discuss is yesterday's session at the UN Security Council, where you have Iran again call for condemnation, again say this cannot be acceptable. How can this situation be acceptable? And more than anything, calling out European nations on their silence, on their complicit silence, or even worse, their blaming of the victim, in this case, the attacked nation, which was Iran, and saying, that this is not how international relations are supposed to work. You had Pakistan, China, and Russia endorsing or promoting a declaration, that called for an immediate end to the war, for mediation, etc. But interestingly enough, only Pakistan spoke about the right of Iran's self-defense. Russia and China didn't really speak too much about this or at all in yesterday's session. Do you think this has anything to do with their ties with Israel? Because Israel has ties with both nations. This is not um, this is Iran's enemy. This is Israel is not so much China or Russia's enemy. And correct me if I'm wrong.
I think yesterday was was Pakistan's time to shine. China and Russia know that the US is going to veto this resolution. They didn't need to make much of an effort, to be honest. They made some strong statements, and recorded their absolute opposition to what the US did and the striking of nuclear facilities. But why show their hands? Yesterday was an opportunity for Pakistan to shine, for Pakistan to put forth a position that nobody 2 weeks ago would have expected from Pakistan. Because the Americans and many Pakistanis have tried to separate themselves, or, distance themselves from the earlier statements that came out of Pakistan after June 16th and Israel's strike on Iran. But Pakistan is on board. All right. This is what I'm saying. Pakistan is on board. I'm pretty convinced that Pakistan has moved military equipment to Iran, that Pakistan did in fact say, we will give you nuclear cover, all the things that they reversed in public statements thereafter. But yesterday was Pakistan's time to shine, and Russia and China didn't have to do anything. These are countries like Iran that practice strategic ambiguity. It has stood them in really good stead for many, many decades. There's no reason we will see their hands until that escalation is necessary. What do you think, Kadim? Why do you think it's even a big deal that the Russians and Chinese didn't say those words exactly, Iran's right to self-defense? Why is that important?
country for me, we need actions. Statements means nothing currently. We saw these countries using even the veto for Syria, and now unfortunately Syria does not exist. Or yeah, I think I can say that. So we need actions. And regarding Pakistan, why Pakistan is like saying all this stuff, we have to know that not long ago India attacked Pakistan, and the attack was in the attack India used Israeli weapons, and we also what happened in Iran. Israeli weapons were inside Iran, and previously the same happened in Russia. And I think
India used Israeli drone
yes,
operators. Pakistan claims those drones were targeting or planning to
yeah.
target their nuclear facilities.
So it's a national security and for Pakistan, and it really shakes its even existence, because if something happened to Iran now, Pakistan, it needs to fight on both sides, on its south and west. So I think it's very important for Pakistan to stand with Iran. I think that's what the even Pakistani army is thinking about. Yani. Now we have India as an enemy, and now we have Israeli weapons inside Iran, which is very dangerous for Pakistan.
Let me intercut with something very quickly, because last Friday, Pakistan officially nominates Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. So, what is actually the message being sent here?
I think I have two thoughts. Either the government is so much separated from the army, or because they know that Trump he's a narcissist and he loves himself. They thought if we nominate this, maybe this will stop him to make like military actions. I don't know why they did this.
You can't kowtow to a bully. It just makes you weaker in their eyes. Pakistan has a very pro-US element in it. These are the elements that illegally ousted Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. There is a pro-US element to this government and to parts of its military. The Pakistani military is not exempt from, Washington's machinations. The Americans are, have infiltrated everywhere. But Pakistan's real national security people are very concerned about Iran. They do not want Iran to lose this war. They do not want Israel to win this war. But the kowtowing minority are, are going to do Washington's bidding. And if it's offering up a nomination for Trump's Peace Prize, which, may be merited in the India-Pakistani theater, but just not generally. And I will guarantee that Trump will not win the Peace Prize, by the way.
Obama did.
Very different.
Rabin did.
Very different.
I don't know. We are living in such times. I wouldn't be shocked by any of these. You also have the original Juan Guaido, Iranian opposition figure Reza Pahlavi. Today he gives a speech calling for Ali Khamenei to step down. So, and yesterday, I mentioned this already a couple of times, that the Trump's MAGA tweet, "Make Iran Great Again," talking about regime change.
Yeah, he will say whatever is on the State Department's teleprompter that gets delivered to his house for his little podcasts.
So in regards to what Trump tweeted last night, and again, let me go back to my opening statement in this podcast when I mentioned J.D. Vance and his a very absurd tweet: "We are at war with Iran's nuclear program, not with Iran." There seems to be a very clear break within MAGA, within the people who are against war or against a war with Iran, because they're thirsty for war with China, and those who just kind of like fell in with the neocons and the Zionist lobby. Donald Trump seems to be part of the latter. J.D. Vance also seems to be, there was this report before the attacks that there was a call with Israeli leaders and the military, etc., in which Trump and Vance and Hexet were all part of it. And Reuters said that Vance was the only one who raised concerns about, another Middle East war, or West Asia war, and nevertheless, he stands behind Trump. He goes to NBC News, gives this ridiculous statement, justifies it. Tulsi Gabbard also walks back her own statement from March on Saturday before the strikes and says, the media is misrepresenting what I said, Iran is a threat, etc. You have essentially all of the Republican lawmakers tweeting the same message, which is Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, even though Iran does not want to have a nuclear weapon. That's been their official position for the past 30 so odd years. And then you have people like Representative Thomas Macy, who is very opposed to the war, who's gone on interviews. He went on an interview yesterday, and I'm sure we can find the clip to include here, in which he, when he's asked about why everyone else seems to be pushing for war, and he just says, well, APAC is very persuasive. The Zionist lobby is very persuasive. Wink, wink. What does he mean by persuasive here? And then Trump says that he wants to create a pact to oust Macy, right? Someone from his own ranks, someone from the MAGA side. So, what is you guys' take on what's happening internally? At some point, I even saw discussion that J.D. Vance, and if he had the support of Congress, he could have called for the articles of impeachment for Donald Trump, dragging the United States into another completely useless war in the name of a separate country, right? Not even like to defend U.S. Interests, although we all know Israel, U.S., same thing. But none of that has come to pass. And now you have everyone just kind of closing ranks behind Trump and his decision. What's the future for MAGA? What do you guys think about what's happening internally in the U.S. Political sphere?
I think now I understood what Trump said, I think like 8 years ago when he said Sisi is my favorite dictator. He's acting the same because Sisi also, when he came, he gave more power for the military and for the internal forces, security forces. And now we're seeing that Trump is saying, as if he's saying, either you're with me or you're my enemy. Even if you are a politician, even if you voted for me, you voted for me because I said I will not do wars. And now I did a war. This is on you.
He did the best war with the best weapon and the best operation that's ever been done in history. And now the war's over.
And now they are saying in their propaganda, I think it only works on the Americans. They are saying that we did this because we will be next. Iran wanted to nuke the United States.
And
That's actually what they are
Trump
doing.
and kill Trump.
That's actually what many people now believe in the United States.
So, I almost don't care. I don't care. Let them impeach him, let them not. Let them fight each other. Let MAGA start to tear itself apart. Let MAGA versus neocons tear itself apart. I promise you, if this goes as the efficient multipolar world leaders envision, regime change will happen in Tel Aviv and in Washington because those countries are coming so aggressively against their adversaries because they're losing ground everywhere. And they only know how to take a sledgehammer to enemies, and they only know to distract their domestic populations by creating global enemies. It's just such an old playbook. Like, who cares? Who I mean, for me, it's you know popcorn TV.
If this was not in the United States, it would be more interesting. But we know how the education system in the United States, they know nothing. I just yesterday before I slept, I was on TikTok and I saw a TikTok for Americans. For an American woman or lady, she's in her 20s, and she said, and she was shocked because she saw Tehran for the first time, and she was questioning where are the camels and where's the desert, and she was genuinely talking about that she thought that Iranians live in tents, so everything will work in the United States, any kind of propaganda.
So let me add what I wanted to say was that there's been a lot of terror mongering already in U.S. media. They're talking about that Iran is going to activate terror cells in the U.S. There was this very stupid headline from Reuters, I think, that they said that Iran had coordinated with drug dealers in France to spark a protest or something. Just like these very ridiculous statements that Western media is well known for. And so you also have, we talked about the Strait of Hormuz, right? I was watching this interview with Colonel Douglas McGregor, I believe is his name, a few days ago, in which he was talking, people in the US, they don't care. They don't care. They cannot even point to where Iran is in the map, except of our viewers, of course, you're a cut above the rest. But in general, yeah, this is a non-educated population. This is a population that doesn't concern themselves with what's happening outside of their own bloc, much less outside of their own country. What McGregor was saying is they're gonna care once the prices of the fuel pump go up, and once like the groceries and the rent and everything else starts going up, which is kind of like what would happen if Iran decides to close the Strait of Hormuz. Or maybe they will also care if all of a sudden you have U.S. service members returning in coffins to the U.S. Then the question will be raised like, wait, why are we at war with Iran? Right? And then all of a sudden, like I am with Karim in this, I do not think that you will have a lot of condemnation for the United States bombing a Middle Eastern country.
Especially if there's a pivotal event that takes place. I mean, if you look at the U.S. Military Special Forces Unconventional Warfare Manual, a lot of these so-called regime change operations are kicked off around a pivotal media event, okay, or event that the media can go to town on, right? And we were talking, or a lot of people were talking on social media about why the about to be retired USS Nimitz was heading to West Asian waters where it could be a sitting duck, right? For Iran to target or Yemeni missiles to target, especially when it's supposed to be decommissioned in 2026, uh, which will cost the US a lot of money to decommission, by the way. And so people were talking about a potential false flag attack on that by the Israelis to pull the Americans into war with Iran. But I'll tell you what the Israelis might be most worried about now is this disparity in views between MAGA and neocons. And maybe the best way to close that gap is to kill Trump. Do you know what I mean? Kill
That's a
Trump, make MAGA the neocons suddenly, right? But either way, it's the US military knows that US military.
Sorry, you mean he might be assassinated internally inside the United States?
Yeah, for sure. Iran had plenty of time when he wasn't president to kill him, and they said they would punish those who killed Soleimani. They could have done it. He was a private citizen then, sure, with security guards, but not compared to what he has now. Why would Iran do a big, pyrotechnic event? Of course they won't. This will be within the United States and or the Israelis who do an attack on Trump if one happens.
Iran did get blamed for the assassination attempts that Trump suffered during the campaign.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, even Tucker Carlson's fight with what's his name, Ted Cruz. He brought that up. He's like, "Are you saying that Iran is trying to assassinate Trump?" And Cruz is like, "Yes, of course they are. You think they are not?" And Carlson's like, "No, I didn't say that. But if in fact Iran had tried to assassinate Trump, why didn't y'all attack Iran then?" Which was a very, very legitimate line of questioning. So it was, it's media spin. It's what the U.S. does to prepare its populations for, military attacks on some random adversary state is to vilify, to villainize, to, axis of evil. They're coming for us. They want to kill our beloved leaders while they kill our beloved leaders. It's just propaganda. But I'm saying it's propaganda that's been laid on pretty thick, so it could be utilized.
It is a cheap propaganda, but it works on them.
Yeah, very cheap.
Very cheap indeed. So, with that, I think we can wrap it up for this week's episode. And a reminder to our loyal viewers, we're going to have an extra section discussing what Iran and Russia might do next, among a couple of other things. So, make sure to check that out. It's going to be a Patreon exclusive. And we'll also make sure to upload it as a members only exclusive in YouTube as well. So, make sure to check out our memberships, to become a supporter of the Cradle, to leave a like, to share this video, to subscribe to our channel, and of course, find us on Telegram and on X, and check out our Patreon, where you can also become a direct supporter of the Cradle. Before we wrap up, I just want to quickly mention a couple of days ago, African Stream closed its doors, a very important outlet for everyone.
I didn't know that.
Yes, yes, they closed their doors. They announced their closure because of U.S. pressure. Because remember, Anthony Blinken called them during a press conference a Russian asset or something or other. And since then, sadly, they were never able to overcome such an attack. So I want to first, of course, I mentioned this because I want to send my love and support to everyone who worked for that very important news outlet, and to let our viewers know that this is what we are all facing. Anyone who stands on this side and decides to tell the truth and decides to speak up against the ridiculous propaganda and lies being peddled by the West and their media apparatus, we are all under attack in one way or another, and they will all come for us. So that's why we need your support now more than ever. So please, again, check out our Patreon, check out our memberships, leave a like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you in our next segment. And of course, we'll see you on Thursday for our first live stream, 8 a.m. Eastern. Make sure to be there to join us. And for the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwan.